Welcome to the Henry George Daily Devotional, episode 51, week 11. If we've done 10 weeks, 5 a week, that's 50. We're on episode 51. Wowie zowie, we are in book 4, the effect of material progress upon the distribution of wealth, and this is starting chapter 3, the effect of improvements in the arts upon the distribution of wealth. I think this also means improvements in technology. Can we do the whole thing? No, I don't think so. Wasting our time. Henry George in 1879 writes, eliminating improvements in the arts, we have seen the effects of increase of population upon the distribution of wealth. That was the last chapter. Eliminating increase of population, let us now see what effect improvements in the arts of production have upon distribution. Arts meaning arts of production. Yes, that is the term. We have seen that increase of population increases rent rather by increasing the productiveness of labor than by decreasing it. If it can now be shown that irrespective of the increase of population, the effect of improvements in methods of production and exchange is to increase rent, the disproof of the Malthusian theory, that is, that population outpaces subsistence, that is, the disproof of the Malthusian theory and of all the doctrines derived from or related to it, will be final and complete, for we shall have accounted for the tendency of material progress to lower wages and depress the condition of the lowest class without recourse to the theory of increasing pressure against the means of subsistence. That this is the case will, I think, appear on the slightest consideration. The effect of inventions and improvements in the productive arts is to save labor. That is, to enable the same result to be secured with less labor, or a greater result with the same labor. Okay. Now, in a society in which the existing power of labor served to satisfy all material desires, and there was no possibility of new desires being called forth by the opportunity of gratifying them, the effect of labor-saving improvements would be simply to reduce the amount of labor expended. But such a state of society, if it can anywhere be found, which I do not believe, exists only where the human most nearly approaches the animal. In the state of society called civilized, and which in this inquiry we are concerned with, the very reverse is the case. You know, I often do think of myself as, oh, I just want these simple little things and nothing more. What do you guys think? If I had all my simple little things, then I'd be like, but I could also do with this other little thing and that other little thing. Or now I'll go do this experience or that experience. Anyway, we often don't have accurate views of ourselves. It's troubling. George continues, demand is not a fixed quantity. That increases only as population increases. I don't like this comma. Demand is not a fixed quantity that increases only as population increases. In each individual it rises with his power of getting the things demanded. Man is not an ox who, when he has eaten his fill, lies down to chew the cud. He is the daughter of the horse leech, who constantly asks for more. When I get some money, said Erasmus, I will buy me some Greek books and afterward some clothes. The amount of wealth produced is nowhere commensurate with the desire for wealth, and desire mounts with every additional opportunity for gratification. This being the case, the effect of labor-saving improvements will be to increase the production of wealth. Now, for the production of wealth, two things are required. Raise your hand if you know the answer. Labor and land. You got it right. Therefore, the effect of labor-saving improvements will be to extend the demand for labor, and wherever the limit of the quality of land in use is reached, to bring into cultivation lands of less natural productiveness, or to extend cultivation on the same lands to a point of lower natural productiveness. And thus, while the primary effect of labor-saving improvements is to increase the power of labor, the secondary effect is to extend cultivation, and where this lowers the margin of cultivation, to increase rent. Thus, where land is entirely appropriated, as in England, or where it is either appropriated or is capable of appropriation as rapidly as it is needed for use, as in the United States, the ultimate effect of labor-saving machinery or improvements is to increase rent without increasing wages or interest. Bom bom bom. That's that's a big deal. Um, this idea that people are just going to want more and more as they get more and more has a lot of implications to it. So if you were to not buy into that, I could see you not buying into other conclusions. I don't view this as like such a terrible, greedy sort of depiction of a human, because I don't view it as him, as Henry claiming that we're going like out of a selfishness, out of like I want these things and you can't have them. It's like a to the stars, like let's all just get more shit together. At least that's a positive way I view it. George continues. It is important that this be fully understood, for it shows that effects attributed by current theories to increase of population are really due to the progress of invention, and explains the otherwise perplexing fact that labor-saving machinery everywhere fails, I think this is fails to benefit laborers. We're going to note this in our typos. Okay. Uh, I heard a Georgist sort of reference this point with the cotton gin. Once the cotton gin was made, wait, cotton gin? What am I talking about? The cotton mill. What was I saying? Wait, what is the cotton? Yeah, okay, it is cotton gin. I got real confused there. Anyway, the invention of this cotton gin says, yeah. What is a gin? That makes me think of alcohol. Whatever. Cotton engine. Gin is short for engine. Wow, we're learning all kinds of things. Georgia said that the invention of the cotton gin actually, so it meant that way more cotton can be spun into wool, or take used, which meant that we needed way more cotton pickers, and it basically reinforced the power of the slave owners in the South and extended slavery quite some time. Uh, yeah, that's a labor-saving invention that then just caused there to be sort of more labor, you know, because more people could pick cotton now. Anyway, back to George's writing. Yet fully to grasp this truth, it is necessary to keep in mind what I have already more than once adverted to. Here's his word adverted, which we've looked up before. The interchangeability of wealth. I refer to this again. This is a serious thing, especially when you're talking about interest. I've heard this again only because it is so persistently forgotten or ignored by writers who speak of agricultural production as though it were to be distinguished from production in general, and of food or subsistence as though it were not included in the term wealth. Remember, wealth is what labor produces, and then wealth can be stored up for the purpose of producing more wealth, which is what makes it capital. But if it's used directly to satisfy your desires, like food would be, then it is wealth. Let me ask the reader to bear in mind what has already been sufficiently illustrated, that the possession or production of any form of wealth is virtually the possession or production of any other form of wealth for which it will exchange, in order that he may clearly see that it is not merely improvements which effect a saving in labor directly applied to land that tend to increase rent, but all improvements that in any way save labor. Yes. That the labor of any individual is applied exclusively to the production of one form of wealth is solely the result of the division of labor. The object of labor on the part of any individual is not the obtainment of wealth in one particular form, but the obtainment of wealth in all the forms that consort with his desires, and hence an improvement which effects a saving in the labor required to produce one of the things desired is in effect an increase in the power of producing all the other things. If it take half a man's labor to keep him in food, and the other half to provide him clothing and shelter, an improvement which would increase his power of producing food would also increase his power of providing clothing and shelter. If his desires for more or better food and for more or better clothing and shelter were equal, an improvement in one department of labor would be precisely equivalent to a like improvement in the other. If the improvement consisted in a doubling of the power of his labor in producing food, he would give 1/3 less labor to the production of food, and 1/3 more to the providing of clothing and shelter. If the improvement doubled his power to provide clothing and shelter, he would give 1/3 less labor to the production of these things, and 1/3 more to the production of food. In either case, the result would be the same. He would be enabled with the same labor to get 1/3 more in quantity or quality of all the things he desired. This reminds me of it kind of reminds me of a talk I had with someone on the Georgist server, Discord server, where they were saying, consider a teacher who works for certain wages, and they're producing X amount of wealth, so they get their compensation, and then there's like a nearby factory that suddenly there's some advancement, I don't know, but for some reason they start paying their workers more. This was just sort of stipulated, I guess, because it was like there's an advancement of some kind, and somehow this is passed on to the laborer in this situation. And so to compete, the government has to pay the teacher more, but yet they're doing the same amount they're producing the same amount of labor, or producing the same amount of wealth from their labor. And I said, no, they are not, because a teacher is, educating a kid, which we assume is just a necessary thing that has to be done for the society to keep going, to keep producing more people who could go work at that factory, for instance. And prior to whatever the advancement was, the amount of wealth created by the factory employee was a certain amount, and the amount of wealth created by the teacher was a certain amount, yes. And then after the advancement, yes, we want to say that it's the factory worker who's now creating more wealth, but in reality it's them together, because I'm not doing a great job here, am I? Because the teaching position is sort of requisite to allow someone else to go even work at the factory. That it's like George's canoe maker letting more people go fishing. Like if the fishing people develop some technique that lets them haul in hundreds more fish, and the canoe maker just is doing his same old thing, making canoes, yet he deserves a raise because society has progressed. Um, because he is, you know, fundamentally providing this ability for more people to go fishing, just like the teacher is providing the ability for more people to go work at the factory. And in that way, uh, progressions in society are shared. That's my terrible explanation. Um, and now we'll go back to George. And so, where production is carried on by the division of labor between individuals, an increase in the power of producing one of the things sought by production in the aggregate adds to the power of obtaining others, and will increase the production of the others to an extent determined by the proportion which the saving of labor bears to the total amount of labor expended, and by the relative strength of desires. I am not unable to think of any form of wealth the demand for which would not be increased by a saving in the labor required to produce the others. Hearses and coffins have been selected as examples of things for which the demand is little likely to increase. But this is true only as to quantity. That increased power of supply would lead to a demand for more expensive hearses and coffins, no one can doubt who has noticed how strong is the desire to show regard for the dead by costly funerals. Nor is the demand for food limited, as in economic reasoning is frequently but erroneously assumed. Subsistence is often spoken of as though it were a fixed quantity, but it is fixed only as having a definite minimum. Less than a certain amount will not keep a human being alive, and less than a somewhat larger amount will not keep a human being in good health. But above this minimum, the subsistence which a human being can use may be increased almost indefinitely. Adam Smith says, and Ricardo endorses the statement, that the desire for food is limited in every man by the narrow capacity of the human stomach. But this manifestly is true only in the sense that when a man's belly is filled, hunger is satisfied. His demands for food have no such limit. The stomach of a Louis XIV, a Louis XV, or a Louis XVI could not hold or digest more than the stomach of a French peasant of equal stature. Yet, while a few rods of ground would supply the black bread and herbs which constituted the subsistence of the peasant, it took hundreds of thousands of acres to supply the demands of the king, who, besides his own wasteful use of the finest qualities of food, required immense supplies for his servants, horses, and dogs, and in the common facts of daily life, in the unsatisfied, though perhaps latent, desires which each one has, we may see how every increase in the power of producing any form of wealth must result in an increased demand for land and the direct products of land. The man who now uses coarse food and lives in a small house will, as a rule, if his income be increased, use more costly food and move to a larger house. If he grows richer and richer, he will procure horses. We have another typo. He will procure horses. No. He will richer. He will procure horses, servants, gardens, and lawns, his demand for the use of land constantly increasing with his wealth. In the city where I write is a man, but the type of men everywhere to be found, who used to boil his own beans and fry his own bacon, but who, now that he has got rich, maintains a townhouse that takes up a whole block, and would answer for a first-class hotel, 2 or 3 country houses with extensive grounds, a large stud of racers, a breeding farm, private track, etc. It certainly takes at least 1,000 times, maybe several thousand times, as much land to supply the demands of this man now as it did when he was poor. And so, every improvement or invention, no matter what it be, which gives to labor the power of producing more wealth. You could be nitpicky and say, like, there's this term subsistence, and that is constant, and then, I don't know, and then call food a sort of a separate thing. Or a lot of this stuff doesn't really. But George is arguing for the exchangeability of wealth and just the increase of the. Anyway, no matter what it be, every improvement or invention which gives to labor the power of producing more wealth causes an increased demand for land and its direct products, and thus tends to force down the margin of cultivation, just as would the demand caused by an increased population. This being the case, every labor-saving invention, whether it be a steam plow, a telegraph, an improved process of smelting ores, a perfecting printing press, or a sewing machine, has a tendency to increase rent. Or, to state this truth concisely, wealth in all its forms being the product of labor applied to land, or the products of land, any increase in the power of labor, the demand for wealth being unsatisfied, will be utilized in procuring more wealth, and thus increase the demand for land. The demand for land. And I'm ending this episode here and no further.